for a lot of people, it's liberating. They say, hey, I'm tired of building someone else's empire. I'm ready to build my own.
Welcome to the Measure Success podcast, where we talk with top leaders about effective strategies that inspire success. We're very excited today to have with us Jon Ostenson. He is the founder and CEO of Fran Bridge Consulting and is regarded one of the top 1% franchise consultants in the United States. Before serving as this, he was the president of Shelf Genie, a national franchise system, and earlier had a long-term career also as a VP of sales at a over $300 million company. He is also an investor himself. This is what I like about him. He actually does what he preaches. He's involved in this. He has multi-brand franchises at what he does. But Jon also has a book that we'd recommend as well, which is called Non-Food Franchising. We'll be talking about all of that today. Jon, welcome to the Measure Success podcast.
Hey, Carl, excited to be with you.
Outstanding. All right, Jon is based out in Atlanta as we're filming this from Oregon. And so we've got a few hours, a little bit of distance. This is a pretty long flight between the different areas behind this. But Jon, as I always like to start out with a interesting story with our guest. And sometimes these stories that were interesting are typically not the fun part of the stories, right? It's the challenges that we've had and we've overcome. And I think what you were sharing about is when you were at Shelf Genie, you had this kind of aha moment, which was really humbling, really challenging. Share with our audience what that was.
Yeah, so no, left the corporate world, came over to Shelf Genie, served as their president, working for the founder of the company, and we had a good run there. But he and I then spun off and started our own business, in which we supported franchisees across a number of different franchise systems. So we built up that company. We ran a marketing agency and a call center. We made the phones ring and then we answered them. That was the idea. But we just became too custom for our clients, and we had built a business. We had about 35 employees, but we really weren't profitable under that model. So, I started to kick the can down the road, realizing I'm going to have to make a tough call potentially if we're not able to change our model. And we tried a number of different tweaks, but ultimately had to make that call and wind the business down. We didn't have a sexy exit, and so this was my first entrepreneurial venture, if you will. I was serving as CEO, and so it's definitely a humbling experience. We onboarded a lot of great employees, but we found great homes for most of them and found homes for our clients. So I'm proud of how we handled the situation, but it was definitely a humbling experience, and one that was certainly ridden with stress and everything else that goes with it. So, business ownership is not for the faint of heart, but that experience has certainly made me appreciate the franchise model all the more, because I was trying to do it on myself before that.
As many listeners know here, not only do we have a strategy firm, but we also have an accounting firm as well. And one of the truths we see is sometimes what appears in the outside is going well is not. And sometimes what doesn't appear to be going well on the outside is actually going well. And I really think it's fascinating for you that you had that just, wow, we've got to stop this because the reality is it's not creating enough profit, right, for this to be a viable business. Even though once again it's growing and you got to ink five thousand sign behind you, it's like you've been a part of companies that have grown a lot, but that's measured in the top line. It's not necessarily measured in the bottom line. And you see this with franchises you're working with because you get to see underneath the kimono, so to speak, right? You see how profitable companies are and profitable or not. So my question for you related to this is, what are the common traits which help people actually be profitable and be successful versus those who aren't?
I always say if business ownership was easy, everyone would be doing it, right? It takes a lot of hard work, and I think if I were to answer that from a franchise standpoint, when I served as president of Shelf Genie, I saw franchisees all across North America running the same business, right? I mean, you had a lot of common variables. The things that were unique to the ones that were the most successful were the ones that followed the system. And that sounds so cliche, but they didn't pretend to be the smartest guy in the room. They came in and they had the humility to say, hey, here's a proven model that if I go out and execute against that playbook and I take the support that they're offering, I'm going to trust the system. They were also willing to spend on marketing. They made tough calls on hiring when they needed to, or letting people go. And so it's some of those business 101 things, but also just being willing to follow the system. So I think where people oftentimes fall down, kind of like I did, was when they try to create a new model. And certainly some of those will work. Most of them don't, right? And again, that's why I appreciate the franchise world in general, is because you have a lot of models that have been proven, in other markets before they ever get rolled out.
It's interesting in being involved in strategic planning and execution, what you said just rings true often. I'll work with organizations like they'll have to have their own flavor, right? Kind of their own DNA they want to do into things. But now, from time to time, they will truly make it better.
Yeah.
But often it's more of an ego thing and it doesn't make it better. Have you been involved in, I'm assuming you have been involved in the coaching of working with a franchisee owner and you had that heart to heart of like, hey, what you're doing, what you're trying isn't working?
Absolutely, absolutely. Ones that I've invested in, ones I haven't been invested in. I've done a lot of this, and it is fascinating because a lot of it comes back to mindset, right? And I've always had business coaches myself. I'm a part of different mastermind groups. I'm a big proponent of getting feedback, and and then also sharing feedback. And so, no, I'd say a lot of it comes down to mindset. A lot of that baggage gets brought into business ownership. Scarcity mentality, or not, like I said, not willing to invest in the marketing, even though that's needed to grow the business, right? You know, it is fascinating. You've got folks out there that are trying to recreate the wheel that think they're the smartest guy in the room, no matter what room they're in. Then you've got others that say, hey, I'm going to learn from others. I'm going to learn from others in other industries too, right? Those that are just constantly looking for inputs to improve what they're doing. So, yeah, big supporter of coaching, and I try to instill that in all those that I work with as well.
Okay, let's go to a bit more just in franchising itself. And it's interesting. I see people go into, like, for example, EOS, which is kind of the gorilla out there in the strategic planning space. And somebody might have no background, honestly, in business, right? They might have been a teacher or, they're working in whatever, plumbing, et cetera. And they're like, hey, I want to have my own business, right? So they go out and they buy this business. What they don't realize is that your paycheck is now created by the work and value that you created. It's not created by just because you decide you pay yourself each month, right? You got to actually create real value behind that. How do you get people to create that shift if they haven't been an entrepreneur in the past? They've been quote unquote an employee, right? For another company. And now they're in the shoes where they're the owner, right? Of that organization. What do you do with them to get that mindset shift? What type of particular habits do they do and structure do they do so they can recognize, hey, you're in a different world now?
About half of those that we work with actually keep their day job while they get the business going. The other half make the jump. So everyone's situation is different. If you're a high paid physician or if you run a dental practice, and we have a lot of those types of clients, they're not looking to leave that high paid job that they currently have, but they want to flex that intellectual curiosity and try their hand at getting another revenue stream going. And again, I tell them it's going to take work, but it really comes down to having a good operator that you put in place, that's going to be teachable and coached by that franchisor. But the other half do make that jump, and oftentimes, we have a lot of guys with the technology background, especially right now with consulting technology. Everyone's reaching out, they're scared for their jobs. But a lot of the business side, as well as others, they are getting into new industries, right? Things that they haven't done before. They've never had to sign the front of the paycheck, not just the back of the paycheck, and so it is an adjustment. For a lot of people, it's liberating. They say, "Hey, I'm tired of building someone else's empire. I'm ready to build my own." And so it's just like all of a sudden, all this hard work they're able to transfer over to doing their own thing. But there are others that do need a lot more handholding. They'll get excited about the idea of business ownership. They'll consume podcasts like these, right? But they stay on the sidelines, or maybe they'll dip their toe in the water and have a few conversations with franchises or businesses that they're for sale, and they get up to the edge of the diving board. Then like, oh no, I can't do it. And the timing's not right. And I've got a wife and I've got kids and I've got let me say this. The timing is never right. The timing's never right to get married. The timing's never right to have kids. The timing's never right to switch jobs, to take the plunge into business ownership. But you look back and you're like, gosh, I wish I'd done that 5 years ago. I wish I'd done it 10 years ago. Of course, today is the best time to start. So, yeah, there's a little bit of science, a little bit of art that goes into it, Carl, but it's just fascinating to kind of see behind the curtains and see people's psychology and where it comes from. Oftentimes, the household they grew up in or the experiences they had, with those closest to them.
I'm really curious about something you said earlier. So are you truly seeing trends right now of people because they're scared of losing their jobs because of AI, I'm assuming, and they're like, "Uh-oh, I better get into franchising. I better own my own business because I'm not gonna have a business or a job here pretty soon."
100%. We see it day in, day out. So every day I read the Wall Street Journal and there's an ongoing narrative. Every day or two, you have an article from CEO of Ford just came out and said 40 to 50% of their white collar workforce is going to be, out of work in a few years. Like things are moving fast and the drumbeat's getting louder and louder. And it's the statements being made by the CEOs are bolder and bolder. And so I'm just this week, I've talked to multiple guys from Accenture, from Salesforce, from Microsoft. And it's not just technology. I mean, we have people from all different types of backgrounds, but there's just a lot of reshuffling in every organization, and it's people are being asked to do more with less. People are concerned about their department may be next, and in some cases they'll say, "Hey, I know I've got a little bit of runway, but I just don't like the culture. I don't like how things are moving right now." And what they're looking for understandable cash flowing businesses, things that are non-trendy, things that aren't going out of style, things that people will always spend on. They'll always spend on their health, their homes, their kids, their pets, their aging parents. There are a number of B2B services businesses too that can tie directly to what they maybe had experienced in their background. So it is fascinating to see the light bulb go on for these individuals when they realize, hey, there could be other options, and maybe that is business ownership, and maybe now's the time. Um, but yeah, that's kind of a long-winded response to your question. We absolutely are seeing firsthand the impacts of AI on the job market.
That I'm not surprised, but I was surprised, if that makes sense. I've been reading the same thing, too every day, but I didn't put the connection in that people are going, "Oh, maybe now it's time to be an entrepreneur," right? Maybe now it's time to have more control, right, over my outcome as opposed to I don't feel like I have control as an employee anymore. And, I've always told people there is no security, it's always false sense of security. But this is not gonna sound good to the employees that are out there, so if you're an employee right now, you just bear with me. But if you're an owner, you'll get this. Back in '22, all the way back in 2022, employees had all the power, and they dominated, and they would regardless of the loyalty, regardless of the money, regardless of things that the employers were paying them, employees couldn't help themselves because 'cause they're getting paid 50 to 100% more to go to a different job. So they left. What had happened over the last couple years, right, has been a lot of people were hired because the big companies in particular were over hiring to grab resources. And of course, they were out of the office. So there was not clear accountability, not clear cause and effect in terms of outcomes that are taking place. And now we have the democratization of AI that has been happening, which we can see every single day for those who use it. And we are definitely a firm that uses it where you can do things in seconds now that used to take half day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, or you just wouldn't even do it, right? Because it just felt like too much work. And so that secure veil that used to exist is gone, right? It's got and by the way, I know somebody who's at Oracle, double the size of they're gonna double in 3 years, but half the company has the fear of God that they're gonna lose their job because they're not involved in the AI side, right? And by the way, if you're one of those people who's listening right now and you work 1 to 2 hours a day and you're making 200, $300,000 a year, good luck, right? This is the time to think about being an entrepreneur while you still have that paycheck. I John, this is my 6th and 7th company I've been involved with, and nearly every single time, not every time, but nearly every single time, I either came in with money where I had, a sense of a little bit of security that I could earn over a period of time, or I moonlit. I was working at 2 jobs, basically. A lot of hard work, but I tell you what, when you have to support a wife and 4 kids, you don't have the luxury, right, to just, "Hey, like a 25-year-old with no obligations," right? Not married, don't have kids. That's different. But when you have obligations, you do have to be responsible, right, when you go into these changes. Alright, so here's these trends, and you have this freaked out, really brilliant somebody, right, who's coming in. What type of franchises are the popular ones right now? What are they going into? They're like, "I need to get into this."
Yeah. What I found is I try not to be too prescriptive with our clients or too early in the process. So what I will do is say, hey, Carl, if you're targeting the Portland market and here's your background based on what I'm seeing out there, I've reached out to these franchisors, checked availability. They want to grow into Portland. Now, here's a dozen different businesses that if I were in your shoes, I would consider, exploring. And we'll touch on a bunch of different industries because Carl, 90% of our clients end up purchasing in a business in an industry that was never even on their radar. So I encourage people to be open-minded because you don't know what's out there until it's right in front of you. So many different niches, but we see a lot of interest in. I mentioned B2B services. Certainly, that's a big one. Home and property services. A lot of private equity getting involved there too. A lot of smart money flowing in. Again, understandable businesses. Everything from flooring to insulation to cabinets to pool cleaning to some of the businesses I'm invested in, I'll just rattle them off. They're kind of non-sexy, and I joke that non-sexy is the new sexy when it comes to business ownership. I've got a business that does asphalt paving and line striping for parking lots. I've got another one that provides temporary walls around renovation projects and construction sites. It's kind of an equipment rental business. Um, those are just two examples of non-sexy ones. But then it's businesses that relate to kids. Just had a client buy 10 trampoline parks. That was a big deal. Most aren't going that big. But it could be things in education or with pets. Pet grooming, pet boarding. Um, seniors is a big one. We'll do some in-home senior care placements, but also senior fitness is a big space. Senior home services, home repair services for seniors. There's so many different niches out there under these broad umbrellas that I mentioned. Um, that again, people with different backgrounds, I can't say, hey, if you have a technology background like we're talking about, here's what you're going to do. But based on the skill sets that you bring with you, here are some good ideas of things that, if you come in with an open mind, that could be a good fit for you.
Yeah, good. Okay. I like that aspect of where you talked about where people are coming in with a business that they had no idea what it was. 90% of them, matter of fact, I think you said there, and they can go into it. And it's interesting because I spend my career working with clients that I've never been in their industry beforehand. That's the vast majority. But what they're missing is it's not the in my case, it's not the details of how they fix their ship their product or provide their service. The value we're providing is the mechanism to grow their business. It's a whole different process, right? It's a whole different expertise, regardless of the details in the business, right? But what you're doing is ultimately what we're seeing regularly from people is where people are in the business. You're providing the SOPs, right? Standard operating procedures for people to come in regardless of their knowledge base to actually do it, right? And to follow once again this prescriptive thought. That's like, by the way, when we're working with companies, it's one of the first things we do if they don't have them. How do we make sure your SOPs are working? So if you lose an employee, you can replace it. And secondly, you can make it better, right? It's hard to make things better if you don't know where your current state is, like of where things are currently taking place. So, so you come in. So next thing I think is the bigger fear because there is usually some level of investment when you go into a franchise, right? That people have to get into. How I know once again it's all over the board, but give us like a range of like when you're typically working with people, what is that range of investment and how is it typically financed?
Yeah, I'd say 80% of those that we work with are investing in a range of 150,000 to 400,000 all in investments. That's your franchise fee, your startup costs, several months of working capital all built in. Some will use all cash to fund that. Most use an SBA loan because banks prefer lending to franchises. It's just more predictable. It's not totally safe, but it's much more predictable. And so oftentimes that will be the mechanism they'll leverage up. You can always pay those back early if you want. Some will use a retirement plan from a previous employer or 401k or IRA. They can roll that over through what's called the ROBS program, ROBS. Certainly HELOCs or other lines of credit are options too. But it's more doable than a lot of people realize when they kind of peel it back and then they look at what can be made potentially in it. Yeah, but when you're looking at franchises, for that investment, you want to, obviously go through the expiration process, do your due diligence. But the benefits that a franchise provides to you, in addition to the SOPs and the processes, you've got shared sourcing of goods and services. You've got a mastermind of other franchisees that are all living the same thing day in, day out. You're learning from each other. I mean, it's really cool, this built-in mastermind. Obviously, the franchisor and their team supporting you. You've got marketing that's been somewhat optimized already for you to step into and adapt, a tech stack day one. So it allows you to get a running start on third base. And Carl, franchising is just like every other industry. Not every franchise is created equal. You've got really strong ones that provide great value, and you've got ones that don't provide great value. So that's where we come in to try to help. But again, on the funding side, 150 to 400 is what we see in most cases.
Whether they know it or not, everybody has a number. What does that number mean? There's 2 numbers. One is the number that you would like to have for your just daily operating, paying for bills, having a reasonable vacation, maybe an unreasonable vacation, right? But you're doing some things that they want to do. And then there's the number to quote unquote retire, right? I'm curious, do you help people to think of this a little bit ahead of time? Do you talk with them about, hey, why are you really getting into this? Other than being afraid of losing your job, right? You know, are you thinking about this properly from the aspect of why are you really willing to take this risk to invest 150,000 to $400,000, even if it's somebody else's money, right? That's real money. By the way, SBA loans are typically personally guaranteed, folks. So yes, it's a loan, but it doesn't mean you can't lose your house, right? Overdoing these type of things. So you have to be thoughtful. You have to be prudent, and ideally, you have the goal of paying it back, right? That is the goal of all these loans. You shouldn't be taking people's money, right? If you don't plan to pay it back. So how do you help out with that idea and that mindset of, hey, where are you trying to go? And let's okay, you're willing to take that risk to get you to this outcome. How do you help them with that?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think where I'm most helpful is to help validate people's thinking. They come in, they know their why. Oftentimes, what I hear is, I want more flexibility in my schedule. I don't want to be on the road traveling as much. I want the freedom. I want to see my efforts build an asset that one day should have exit value, right? I don't want to just build someone else's empire. So, I see these common through lines. And so I'm able to help validate their thinking and let them know, hey, you're in a really good company. Your background is very similar to a lot of others we've worked with recently. And they were saying the same things. You're thinking about it the right way. And so people are like, oh, I'm not alone, right? And so I'd say that's probably the biggest piece. Oftentimes someone may have a spouse that's going to continue working, or in some cases, they'll jump in the business with them. In some cases, they all may already be an existing business owner and they're looking for another revenue stream that either complements or diversifies. So, I'm just able to share case studies to help them in their thinking. And oftentimes I either validate, but I also point out, hey, have you thought about it this way? Or, hey, when you're comparing, what you can make in this business versus your previous salary, have you ever thought about the fact that the government has put together a tax playbook that incentivizes business owners? Here's some of the things that I personally do, whether it be paying my kids or a defined benefit plan, or, just things that you can do as a business owner you couldn't as a W-2. And again, that's kind of when the light bulb starts going on for them. Like, wait, it's apples and oranges, right? It's not apples to apples.
So now how do you measure success in this franchising industry for your clients that you have?
Yeah, it's when they come back and they buy additional territories, they come back to buy additional brands, they come back and they refer their brother-in-law to me. That's what gets me excited. That's where my validation and what I do comes from. And again, just countless case studies of that. Carl, not everyone makes it, right? I mean, there will be a percentage. Oftentimes it's around 10% that I see of those that we work with that several years in say, "Hey, this isn't for me for whatever reason." But again, I'm very proud of the majority of our clients that do very well in this. But yeah, that's where I get my validation, is seeing their success. And yeah, I mean, our consulting business has been back to back Inc. 5000 award winners, and it's because of the number of clients that we've been able to help have successful outcomes.
So that's an extraordinary number. 90% success rate's not common with like nearly anything, right? It's usually the opposite. It feels like, and then the reality, it's like 10% success and 90% failure. So I got to imagine you're evaluating the people who are coming to work with you. You're not just taking anybody off the street and saying, I can help you out.
Correct. And when I say 90%, there's going to be varying levels of success within that, right? I'm not saying that everyone is hitting a certain number. I do believe and I don't have visibility into most of my clients' P&Ls, once they're launched. I always say, "Hey, keep in touch. I'd love to hear how you're doing." But I don't have visibility. And so, I kind of just go ad hoc on what they share with me. But, 90% or so that are still in business, different levels of success within that. But again, it's those that come back and buy additional that I'm not like, well, things must be going pretty well for you.
It sounds like though you're doing some bit of discernment of people who are coming in. You're not just letting anybody who is thinking about it to work with you because you want to make sure your clients are having success also.
Yeah, we only work with those that have raised their hand and reach out to us. Typically, half of our clients are referred to us by others that think that they would be a good franchisee. A number of people listen to podcasts like this and say, "Hey, would love to learn more," or maybe they've read our book. So, it's kind of self-selected individuals in the beginning. And again, I don't sugarcoat it. I shoot them straight on what it looks like, what that break-even point looks like. The ramp up. So, the ones that I think have the chutzpah to move forward do. So I think where our clients come from, but then we also try to educate them so that only the ones that move forward are the ones that should be moving forward. And sometimes they'll fool you, and maybe they never should have been in business ownership. But I think we have a pretty good filter. And I have to have the hard conversation with some of them that, hey, you're too entrepreneurial. Franchising's not for you. You want to put your thumbprints all over it. In some cases, it's I don't think that you've got kind of there's just too much fear that you can't get over. Everyone's got some fear, right? But some people are paralyzed by their fear, and business ownership may not be right for them.
John, one of the things I love to ask I ask people, our guests, excuse me, on the podcast is, what you're doing and have done is remarkable, right? To get to a point where you think 5,000, you're growing successfully. There's depending how you count it, right? There's either 30 plus million businesses or there's a million, depending on like what are real businesses or not businesses, if that makes sense behind it. But to be in the top 5,000 is extraordinary, meaning that you have a really high growth rate to get there. So how do you keep it up? What type of habits are you doing on a personal basis to help make sure that you're delivering your best?
Yeah, try to stay very grounded. I've got the 5 domains: faith, family, slash friends. It would be fitness, finances, and franchising, right? The business side. So the 5 F's. And yeah, I nerd out on health and wellness. I'm now in my mid 40s, and so I'm doing everything I can: daily peptide injections, hyperbarics, sauna. I nerd out. I've got a personal trainer I work out with a couple times a week. So definitely, try to keep up there. I track everything on the Whoop. I love data. But certainly faith and family are most important to me, whether it be out there coaching my son's basketball, which I'll be doing tomorrow, or taking my daughter to a daddy-daughter dance. So no, try to stay balanced and giving back. We serve the community in different capacities as well. But yeah, it's all about relationships at the end of the day, and try to let that feed into what I do business wise. I feel very blessed that I get to help others in the way that I do. And a lot of our clients will invest in real estate and other segments. I personally do too, directly and indirectly. And I'm spread across probably 10 different asset classes. My humble belief is that business ownership is a really good asset class to have in there, and I think it is going forward. Love educating, and yeah, it is multidimensional. It's not just on the business side.
That's well said there. So how do you now measure success with your personal life?
Yeah. I do. I'm a big believer in passive income. So on the finance side, it's building up, revenue streams of things that pay you while you're sleeping. I'm trying to teach my kids that. So certainly that's the easily quantifiable side. But then no, it's who my kids are becoming, and kind of seeing the growth there. I mean, that's most important to me and my wife. And we took 5 international trips this past year. I mean, we love getting out there, spending that time, investing in memory making. And I love this time of year too, Carl, when you're looking back and reflecting on everything that you packed into the previous year. What would you do again? What changes would you make? So, in the same way I evaluate the business and set goals there, I do the same thing on the personal side. And, and I certainly make mistakes and learn from them. But, our North Star is we want our kids to want to hang out with us one day when they don't have to. And so we march in that direction.
That's I think a very worthy goal. It's neat. Just last night, my daughter, she's like, "Hey, will somebody go out with me?" She wanted to go to the like local restaurant that is nearby, and nobody else raised their hand because they were just busy on different things, and it was just a joy, right, to get to be present with her, and then she wanted to, right? That is, I agree with you. That is a true sign of success with that. All right, now you have a book, of course, Non-Food Franchising, which I recommend people to take a look, and I'm assuming they could find that on Amazon, right, and all of the major outlets out there. What is a book that's not your book that you regularly recommend to others?
Yeah, a book called The Lifestyle Investor that kind of hits on that passive income side. It was written by my good friend Justin Donald, and have been involved with his mastermind in the past around lifestyle investing, and it's the idea of your passive income exceeding your monthly expenses. So, for me, that was just good validation to some of the ways I was thinking, from a strategic standpoint too. So, I think you hear that term a lot, passive income out there, but the book, The Lifestyle Investor, helps you kind of put the pieces in place. And yeah, just as far as my book goes, would love to share a free copy with all of your listeners. If you come out to franbridgeconsulting.com, we'll share your email address. We'll send you a copy.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for that offer, and once again, please take advantage of that opportunity to be able to help get that book within that. So, leading to that, how can people connect, get that book, and learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, come out to our website, franbridgeconsulting.com, FRAN bridgeconsulting.com, and share your email address. We'll reach out with links to download the book. If you'd like to buy a copy, all the proceeds go to Hope International, a great nonprofit that we support. So if you buy on Amazon or somewhere else, know that it's going to a good cause. But no, when we reach out and share the links to the book, if you'd like to jump on a call, I'd be more than happy to connect and talk more about franchising. I'm passionate about it, as you can tell, and I would love to help you identify the top opportunities in your market.
John, I really appreciated the insights you did today. There's a little nugget you said there that was really important that I didn't want to miss before we close this out, which is, if you're really thinking properly about passive income, the goal is for your passive income to exceed your daily operating needs, right? As a person, your monthly expenses, et cetera. That is when you have freedom, right? When you really have that built in. It's where you don't literally have to work, right, so to speak, right, to be able to carry that for that passive income side. But you still have to be wise, right, of going through this and putting your money in the right places. So I think that's an absolutely brilliant part. And the reason why, once again, we continue to get great guests like John is because of your support. It's why we become the fourth best strategic planning podcast out there. It's because of guests like John who've been on the show. So I encourage you once again to follow up to see what he's doing. And John, thank you so much for being a guest on the Measure Success podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
To everyone else who's listening, as we always like to say, wishing you the very best in measuring your success. Have a great day.